Hello, everybody. Welcome. I take a few seconds to welcome you, to welcome everybody. So welcome to the 9th edition of God, of France versus Silicon Valley. What's next? So our theme today is God and the Silicon Valley, and we'll explain in a few seconds why we choose this title. But before we introduce you to our two amazing speakers today, I just want to take a few seconds to introduce myself. So I'm Laurence Fabre, the Executive Director of the French-American Chamber of Commerce in San Francisco. So we are based right now in San Francisco, and we co-organize this live edition with the first business magazine in France, the magazine Challenge. And so I want to thank Gilles Fontaine, the editor-in-chief of magazine Challenge, who will be here in a few seconds to introduce you to the speakers and to the theme. We are, as the French-American Chamber of Commerce in San Francisco, we are a non-profit organization. We are member-based. So I want to thank first our sponsors, so Bank of the West, Capgemini, and Salesforce for supporting us for this edition. So this is a 9th edition. We'll have a 10th edition soon as well. Before we start, you can leave a few comments in the LinkedIn comments. So Gilles will select the question as they come as well. And now I can give the floor to Gilles Fontaine, the editor-in-chief of Magazine Challenge, and to our two speakers. And Gilles will introduce you to the speakers. I hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you very much for joining us today. And let's see you at the end of the session.
Thank you, Laurence. Thank you, and hello, everyone. It's great to have you for this 9th session of this webinar that we are co-organizing with the Franco-American Chamber of Commerce in San Francisco, with a very special theme tonight or this morning for you, and with two great speakers. I respect them both. I know them well, and they're really great person to see. Of course, you know Luc Julia from Samsung Electronics. He's been leading the Siri program at Apple for a few years, working with Samsung for quite a time, Luc. You've been heading the innovation division. You're a vice president for innovation at Samsung Electronics for a few years now. And the second speaker is Father Eric Salobir, also known as the Geek Priest. Hello, Eric, in Paris.
Hello.
I know you were in Rome yesterday. Maybe you'll talk about that later. You're still traveling a lot, you know, as Luc and I are grounded, me in Paris, and he's been grounded in San Francisco for quite a while. You're still traveling a lot, so that's pretty interesting. You'll give us a few tips of how you do that in very complicated times. So it's two great speakers and one very original theme, I think. We named it after your book, Eric, God and Silicon Valley. Maybe also you'll give us a few some details of the job you do with your Optic. It's a think tank based in Paris, but I know you work with CEOs and organizations all over the world. The whole idea of this session is to see and check out the Silicon Valley, check on the Silicon Valley, how it's doing right now after this sanitary crisis, coronavirus. Maybe we'll start with you, Luc. You've been living there for over 25 years, and you spent most of the lockdown in Palo Alto, in your house, in your wonderful house in Palo Alto, at the very heart of the Silicon Valley. What did you see? What has changed over the past year in terms of ethics, in terms of mentality? What can you tell us from that?
Yeah, so what we can say, good morning, good afternoon, good night, everybody. So what we can say, in the past few months, 9 months now, is that the Silicon Valley actually took a great advantage, of the crisis. There is a reason for that. Everybody heard about the incredible profit that all the companies, have been doing in the past year, basically. They just, broke all the records that you can imagine, and there is a simple reason for that. It's because we were prepared. So we were not prepared for the actual crisis, the sanitary crisis, but we are prepared to work remote. We are prepared to have the tools in order to be able to work remotely. And obviously, we were building the tools ourselves. So, all the companies that are around here, we are building for the past few years those tools that everybody, needed to use during the lockdown. So the reality is that the Silicon Valley did benefit a lot from the crisis. Now, I think that, and we see that very, very recently, that this is not only because this crisis, but also because of the political crisis that we are in. We also are seeing, that they are realizing, people here are realizing that there is impact, of the technology. And so we need to bring the ethics more and more. So a lot of people were not very aware of the ethics, I would say, until this crisis. And now it's coming, in the mind of people. That's why you have, a union that is being formed at Google, which is, just incredible here, and stuff like that. So there is a sense of responsibility that is coming up, I think, in the past few months also, because of the sanitary crisis, but also because of the political one.
Thank you for this introduction, Luc, and maybe you can react on this, Eric. Of course, you were used to make you traveled quite a lot in Silicon Valley over the past few years. When was the last time you went there? And from the contact you have with people over there, what are your impressions?
Yeah, my first feeling is the same as the one of Luc. It's this crisis, and especially the 2 lockdowns, were big boosters for digital technologies, remote work, online services, and so on. For sure, it was great. But at the same time, it seems that there's a kind of distrust, at least in Europe, toward technology or some tech leaders or whatever, and people are more and more reluctant, for example, to share the data. So this is something that will have to be taken in consideration. And when Luc speaks about the rise of ethics and ethical issues in the tech industry, I think that's the right time for that, because clients, customers, users currently are eager to have their rights more protected, and that's why, for example, some companies which claim to protect the rights of the users and, for example, privacy, they rocket up. They work pretty well, and they do pretty well. And I think that is really now the time when we will have to make a couple of changes. I'm clearly a geek. I'm clearly a tech enthusiast. But I think that, as Luc said, it's really time to have a better look on impact and on ethics.
Mm-hmm. You're right. This is probably, this crisis has accelerated some of the things that already existed previously to that. You mentioned the privacy issues, for instance. They were there already before the pandemic, and how can you explain that? How did this crisis, and why did it accelerate the impression that people could take hold of their digital life, for instance? Luc,
Yeah, I'm just going to say that it's because we are living now a real digital life. I mean, the reality is that before, it was a mix. I mean, for the past 9 months, I mean, we are basically, at home all the time, and we are living a full digital life. So this is why, people are starting to realize why is, GDPR in Europe important. This is why they start to realize, that there is potential issues. There are potential issues, and so they are, coming there. I mean, when we are doing this video right now, people, are saying, so is it recorded? Are we going to find that later? I mean, do we need to be careful of what I'm saying or what I'm wearing or what, so, I mean, this thing in the real life, I mean, in the office, I didn't have this issue, right? But now, I'm realizing that by using those tools, there might be some issues. And again, GDPR in Europe did point that out 2 years ago. I mean, it was more than 2 years ago now, but people just are realizing now.
But it's interesting. You said that Silicon Valley was prepared to not necessarily such a pandemic or such a sanitary crisis. Eric, for instance, had to do with it. He wasn't, or maybe I was in the same case. We don't have the tools that you have. We don't have the technologies that you have, and so okay. Silicon Valley was ready for the lockdown, let's say. But how did Silicon Valley help people and countries solve this crisis? And Eric, you want to take that question?
I would say they didn't, and they didn't just because it was not possible to do it. I mean, the first thing we have to keep in mind is that our super powerful and pretty expensive technology did not protect us enough against the virus. I mean, and perhaps even not the technology, but our way of life, our technological way of life was part of the reasons why the virus spread so fast. I mean, you know that the number of people flying each year has doubled since 2006, I think. And we have value chains always longer, always more complex, and so on. So we're always more intricate, and there are many very good points in that. I mean, products and services are cheaper. Many things are really better. But at the same time, there's perhaps a kind of backdraft. There's a dark side in that. This complexity and those connections, and perhaps the way we at some point we deal with nature, the way we deal with our environment, perhaps some things also have to be changed because it was perhaps part of the problem, the difficulty. So it's not to blame some companies or actors or whatever. It's just like collectively, the way we use energy, the way we use the raw materials, the way we find them. And I mean, at some point, the danger is that perhaps we go a little bit too fast and too far, and we try to use technologies like algorithms to manage a complexity that perhaps is a little bit too complex for us. And at some point, that could explain at least part of the difficulties with, I mean, it doesn't explain the pandemic by itself. I mean, there always have been pandemics before internet or whatever, or before planes. But perhaps this is the opportunity to see what works, what doesn't work, and what we have to change. And perhaps we have to update our software, our economical and social software.
Yeah, Luc, you are responsible for creating these very complicated algorithms, right? In a way.
And
you say that most of these complicated algorithms are useless, or
I won't go, to say that they are useless. I mean, some of them are, very useful. I mean, but as Eric said, I mean, we need at one point to collectively decide what are the ones that are good and useful, and what are the ones that are totally useless. Because the energy that is deployed to run those algorithms today, because it's so easy to do, right? I mean, when we talk about machine learning and deep learning, so all the new technologies around AI, when we talk about that, I mean, it's very, very affordable. Everybody can do it with a lot of data, and there is a lot of data everywhere. With a lot of data, you just crunch those data with a bunch of algorithms, and you don't really care, the energy, because you don't see it. You don't see that in the back end, those big computers are crunching those data, and you are sending, a bunch of algorithms towards those data, and then, you are getting a result. I mean, if you run 100 algorithms, only one is going to do something interesting, but you have 99 of them that are going to be, wasted, right? And this is because it's too easy. So we need to realize what that means, because today, I mean, I don't see those backend thing, I don't see those big data centers. So if I don't see them, I don't feel it. And if I don't feel it, I don't care. So this is the main issue, I think, today with algorithms. So I really think that a lot are useful. I mean, of course, I'm not going to blame the people that are going to fix cancer, and the people that are going to improve transportation. And so there is a lot of things that are very, very interesting and that we need to do. But there is some, algorithms and some resources that are being used for some stupid games or something. I mean, those guys, I mean, why? Why do we do that? So collectively, because we start to understand, I mean, because this pandemic, helped, as we said earlier, for the people to understand that there are some potential issues, we need to regulate all together. But to regulate, we need to understand. So the very first step is to educate ourselves about those technologies, to understand them. And if what happened, during the pandemic was interesting for the Valley, is that, as I said, I mean, we knew about the tools before, but now the tools are in the hands of, millions and millions of people, many more than in the Silicon Valley. And in the Silicon Valley, people who are creating those tools, they might not want for you to know exactly, why they build those tools, right? I mean, this is another issue, is that, I mean, if the profit that has been done, in the past year is such, it's because, I mean, there is something also maybe wrong in the way we are making money, with those algorithms and with those services. So now that more and more people understand that, we need maybe to put some pressure on the people who are creating those technologies.
Eric, do you see also a change in?
Actually, I like this idea of starting with the why, which is one of the mantras of the Valley. But I think that too often we don't do that, and we don't check if we really need those services. And I mean, some of them, for example, currently one of the big issues in Europe is 5G, and I'm sure that it can allow to have a better flow of data, and so manage many services at the same time, and probably to have smarter cities and so on, or more organized things. Why not? Companies and so on. But at the same time, I guess that those bigger tubes will just allow to put more data. Which kind of data will go there? If it's just like a 5K, 6K, 8K streaming, I don't know, 3D, whatever. I mean, entertainment is not bad. And I'm not blaming the people who use those technologies for entertainment if other ones use that for science or safety reasons or whatever, but we just need to prioritize the use of those technologies and the use of the energy. And this is something, I mean, this session is entitled after the title of my book, but the one of the book of Luc is about the artificial intelligence, which doesn't exist, is I mean, needs to focus on two. And I think what he says is true about the fact that, I mean, there's a huge use of technology and so money, and on the same time energy, that probably is not well prioritized. And I think that at some point we just need collectively to check. It's possible, but does it mean that it's good? I mean, there's a kind of split, I would say, from a more or less philosophical point of view, between innovation and progress. Innovation, it's new, but it doesn't mean that it's better. And the question is, are we sure that what we implement helps us to have a better life, not just a new and different life?
Yeah, thank you, Eric. I would like to just to remind you that you have the possibility to ask, I'm addressing the participants here, you have the possibility to ask some questions during the session, and of course I will ask these questions to our two speakers today. Like Alain, for instance, he has an interesting point. He says the real question is how to, process and choose the good data among the huge amount of data that you have out there. So is there is that, Luc, is that the point? I mean, is that the issue here? You have good data that
Yeah,
you
I
can
mean,
use?
and we know very well that there have been issues, in the past, and there are issues today in some programs when you use basically the wrong data or not the good data, right? This is what we call bias in the data. So, so that data is biased anyway because, I mean, this is historical. And the history is not maybe exactly what happens today. One of the examples is this credit card issue that Apple had about a year ago when they released their credit card. I mean, basically the women were getting half of the credit of men, right? Because historically, this is what was in the database. But obviously, it doesn't reflect what the current situation is. And a woman who had the exact same situation as a man was getting half of the credit, right? Which is obviously ridiculous because it was chosen by a AI, right? But actually, it was chosen by a human who used, the wrong database or didn't debias the database, before doing the actual AI. So choosing the fact that we are collecting all this amount of data is actually pretty bad because, I mean, we use a very small part of it. There is a big petroleum company, for instance, that is claiming that they are doing AI. And when you look at the actual data, they are using 0.1% of the data that they are collecting from their, different machinery, right? So we collect a lot. We don't use a lot because we don't have the opportunity to do it. It's too much, right? So that's why it's another issue with the choices that we have to make and the things that we have to decide collectively. So, I mean, it's weird when I say, as an innovator, when I say we need regulation, because people don't expect me to say that we need regulation because I want to be free to innovate and to do whatever. But I want actually regulation because I want regulation to educate people. Because for me, the regulation, is part of education.
So we have an interesting, also another interesting point. 20 minutes inside in this discussion, still no mention of God. By God, I think we were, of course, we were referring to your book, Eric, and of course you've been studying and researching on this topic for a few years now with your team, and have these conversations with CEOs on both sides of the Atlantic, here in Europe and in the Silicon Valley. Some of the founders and CEOs in Silicon Valley pretty well. It's all a matter of ethics and how you restore ethics in most of the business models of course Silicon Valley's, but Silicon Valley startups, but also here in Europe. Do you see also a trend in that? And I mean, CEOs and founders taking these questions into account more than before?
I would say just to try to answer to this question or this statement about the lack of God in the conversation, I would say first, and this is from the Catholic point of view, but in many religions, God and the presence of God is clearly related to human dignity. And this is what we work on. I mean, what we want to do is to have the right vision of the human being and to be sure that people will be able to flourish, because standing alive people are the basis for a spiritual life. And this is, I would say, first what we're looking for. And when I go in the valley, just to stay a little bit in this area, I find clearly a real spiritual need, or people are eager to that. So it's in different ways. I mean, it can be a well-known religion, it can be a kind of wellness, or it can be meditation, it can be many things. But you see that people are, I mean, turning around to try to find something just because it's part of what the human being is built on, and everybody has to find his own more common one, but it has to be fun. And the point is, for me, that once we start to consider the human being, it has to be considered, so not as a user or not as a customer, but really as a human being, then we can have use properly the technologies to serve this person. And that's what we're trying to do, putting the human being at the center of the equation. I mean, everybody does a user experience, try to let's say make this user experience better. But Luc was talking about measuring things, and for me this is one of the keys, because when you don't measure something, it doesn't exist. And I think, for example, with Tech for Good, the initiative of President Macron, we're working on tools to evaluate inclusiveness of technology, and this is something which is pretty important. I mean, it seems to be just a notion, but does a new technology help people to be more, let's say, socially and economically more included in the society? And this is something that can be evaluated. And I guess perhaps we need a new set of non-financial KPIs just to try to evaluate what has to be done, or what we have to choose as a technology, or as a service, or as a device, but also where we have to put the money. And we need to flag that, just to be sure that the ones who propose not only the user experience or the technology, but also the ecosystem around that really takes care of the society, those ones will receive more power and more means to develop their projects. For me, this is a key point. So as you can hear now, it comes from God, and it goes to very practical and specific decisions that have to be made, just to be sure that, I would say, as a Catholic, to build a society in accordance with the gospel, but someone who comes from another spiritual let's say mindset or background would say things differently. But I guess that from an anthropological and ethical point of view, we will join on, we will come together on this need to put the human being at the center.
Yeah, of course, Eric, you are an advisor to these tech companies and CEOs, right? Do you have the impression that they listen to you, these guys listen to you because you're a priest, and that you are a reference and you know, more than, you know, a McKinsey consultant? Or
I'm not an advisor at all, I would say. I let that for the ones. I mean, some people you're mentioning McKinsey or other ones, and that's their business and they know how to do it. What I just try to do is to initiate a dialogue between people who never talk to each other normally. So people from the tech industry, people from philosophy or anthropology or sociology, and even or ethics, and not only in the way it's done in the Valley, which is interesting from the Anglo-Saxon, I would say, point of view, more consequentialist. But I try to introduce other perspectives, because consequentialism, I would say, would allow to say, if I do something and it's bad for nobody, I say, don't be evil. So, okay, I do nothing bad. But Kant would say, okay, once you've done nothing bad, you didn't do anything good. And the point is not only not to damage or endanger the social fabric. The point is also to contribute to build it. So my role is more like a kind of go-between between many very interesting people, and that's fantastic. That's a fantastic job, because I meet all the time very smart and interesting people. And I don't remember who said if you're the smarter guy in the room, you're not in the right room. And I'm always in the right room, because I always meet smarter people than me. But the point is to try to combine them. And just to go back to you to your question, for me, I think that they see, as Luc said previously, they see that it's really time to introduce some changes, and working on the impact and the consequences of the technologies on the society is for them now a key issue.
Yeah, we were, Luc, we were discussing this why and how question previously, and Charlotte asks why, how, who is responsible for that in
yeah. So
big or small? I mean,
yeah. So first of all, I mean, I want to say that two things. I mean, the first one is that God has been, you know, in this conversation since the beginning. When you look at the image of Eric, because the halo of light, that is next to him.
The flare
So,
here, yeah.
so yeah, this one. So God is here next
A
to
lot
him, right?
of research and development.
Yeah. So he's there. Second, I mean, more seriously, I mean, I think that Eric's job, and the fact that he is actually coming to the Valley and that he is doing this go-between job that he's talking about is very, very important, because a lot of people in the Silicon Valley may think that they are God themselves, right? So it's good sometimes to bring more humanity and to have a priest explaining to them who God is really. Who is really, instead of making them think that they are gods, it's, I think, a good thing, because it brings, people down to earth, and is going to tell them that what they are doing is just technology, right? So they need to calm down a little bit, and maybe, it will allow the Silicon Valley to be a little bit less arrogant as well. Because I mean, the fact that we are the Silicon Valley, we are the best, right? This is what we believe. So anyway, that said, I mean, who is responsible? I mean, we are responsible. So of course, the people who are bringing up the technology are responsible. The people who are selling the technology are responsible. But I mean, the guys who are speaking up are responsible, right? And the guys who are leading those companies are responsible. That's why it's very, very important to talk to them and to have people like Eric and people that are going to tell them, look, I mean, what your mission is really, not to bring. Of course, you have to bring some money, to the company and do that. But you have also to bring a service, to bring something that is going to be useful to humanity. I mean, if you have, billions of users, I mean, it has to be useful for humanity. And today, I'm not sure that this is something that those people have in mind anymore.
And if I can just jump on that, sure. I would say I agree that people who have a great power have a great responsibility. I mean, just quoting the uncle of Spider-Man, but I mean, I think it's true. But at the same time, I think this is a shared responsibility, because each of us can consider that he or she is God. I mean, this is something that appears in all the religions, this kind of dream of mightiness. Let's say I'm almighty. And we have to have this kind of, I would say, mourning the Almighty in ourselves, and just to have a better interaction with technology. And this is a kind of paradox. On one side, we can have the feeling that with this technology, we are like gods. And I remember some conversations in transhumanism, people saying, oh, the person who will live 200 years is already in the room. Unfortunately, then the pandemic came, and we see that it's not so relevant as a statement. But so on one side, we have that. On the other side, we always try to build new gods. And that's interesting. My feeling is that just to mention that once we have built machines able to do things more or less automatically, we have called them robots, according to a word in Czech that means slave. And actually, so if we build something, we are the god of the things that we're building. At the same time, what we build is also totem. If I take my device, for example, my phone, I mean, all my life is inside. I rely on it. At some point, I have invested a lot of money in it, and at some point I expect that it will provide me a kind of, not salvation, but let's say support. That's exactly how totems work. And this is an anthropological, this is a basis. And this is interesting to see that actually we have a super technological society with a big layer of shamanism. I mean, this magic thought has not disappeared. We just transfer that from some ancient things to new technologies. And I think that having an idea of God perhaps could avoid to go too far, rely too much on technology, which is not God.
Yeah. So there's another word that we didn't mention since the beginning, or maybe once. It's evil, right? Some of these companies promise not to become evil. And back to the founding of the Silicon Valley, as maybe over the 50 past years, the promise was to make the world a better place, right? Did the Silicon Valley lost its soul?
I don't think that it did. I mean, still there is a spirit here. I mean, there is a spirit. I don't know exactly what it is, but there is something that you smell, that you feel when you are joining the Silicon Valley, and this is a spirit of what I call the initial founding of the West Coast, right? So this is a gold rush. This is the spirit of the gold rush back in 1850. So it means that you had a lot of people from different countries and from different, background that are coming together in order to look for something. I mean, at the time it was gold, but now, it's about technology. And so, and we are here in this emulation, trying to do something. And so this spirit is still there because people just love the idea of being together, creating together something that is going to help somehow humanity. This is what it starts with. So after that, it can deviate and go somewhere else. But I mean, the spirit of the beginning is still there. This, gold rush spirit is still there. So I really, really still believe that. I really felt it 27 years ago, when I came here. And I didn't plan to stay, frankly, at the time. But I mean, it became obvious after a few months that I had to stay because it was just incredible. So I still believe it's there. And we try to do that, people try to emulate that in a lot of different countries. And so there are many, many Silicon Valleys now, quote unquote. But this one, it's still the biggest one and the one that drives and brings many, many people from different backgrounds. And this is what makes, those incredible products that we are making sometimes.
We have also a few. Oh, sorry, Eric, you want to?
No, to jump in on that, yeah. I would say for sure what really pleases me all the time when I go in the Valley is the enthusiasm. I mean, it unfortunately, in too many places in Europe, if you come with a new idea, people will say, but why to do that? And there they will say, why not? And this is very different. I mean, this is a different mindset, and perhaps this is the mindset for success. But just, I don't know if we can react to those chats, because a lot of things are said or written in the margin, and they are very interesting too. And I've seen one from Eve saying that actually those big companies, I mean, their leaders, the CEOs, they have to make profit, and they have to put profit on top of the priorities, just because that's the law. That they could be suited by their shareholders or bankers if they don't do that, and that's exactly what was, let's say, put together as a theory in the motto, the business of business is business. That's what was, I would say, it was the motto of neoliberalism, saying, okay, a company is just there to make profit. Then it can have a side foundation spending a fraction of this profit for good causes and so on, but it will make money first. And I think that now things are perhaps changing. More and more things are, people are talking about the possibility of having an inclusive capitalism. Just a kind of the new step, the new version of the capitalism perhaps has to include other KPIs and other ways to evaluate the success of a company. And for example, the impact on the society and the impact on the ecosystem can be one of the keys for this success that can be evaluated by a KPI, and so that can be also valued by the market. And what this crisis has shown to my mind is that companies that are flourishing in the crisis are the ones which have the stronger ecosystem, meaning that they take care about all the shareholders, including employees, including providers, and not only being focused on short, let's say, having a good quarter.
Yeah, but maybe the things are changing that way, because now CEOs and corporations also have new obligations in terms of climate change, social also social issues and so on. it's not just the time of social washing and greenwashing is over in a way. Don't you think?
I think so. I mean, people don't trust anymore greenwashing, and I would not like that the same phenomenon occurs for the CSR, the corporate social responsibilities. If people have the feeling that it's just bullshit, at some point they will definitely mistrust the big companies. And I think that that's the time now to be sure that we implement the right tools also to control, and at some point a little bit of regulation perhaps will be needed in this field too.
I'm going to go back, to education, because I mean, at the end of the day, because more and more people are using those tools that we were talking about, during this pandemic and something. I mean, people are realizing they are teaching themselves, stuff, but they're also, looking at more how it works and stuff like that. So, I mean, education about those tools, about those companies that are behind the tools, is more and more, prevalent in the society. So this is where, people realizing what is behind that is going to push. I mean, this is not about greenwashing anymore. This is about green, period, right? So we need to realize what is happening by learning how it's being done. And then, we as a collective, we are going, to bring to the people who are going to be responsible for the regulation, for making decisions, we are going to bring to them some ideas of what kind of society we want, right? So this is hopefully what Eric is saying when he says that we need a change. I mean, a change in capitalism, a change in the society. I mean, we definitely need it, because we are realizing right now that we are going straight into the wall, the way we are building those things, right? I mean, in terms of technology, but in terms also of pure capitalism, right? So we need to, be more conscious about that. But to be more conscious about that, we need more people to be conscious about that. And the more, people are educated about it, the more we are going to be able to change the society the way it should be, to be better for, most people.
We have also a few questions on transhumanism and especially the job that's done by the Singularity Institute in the Silicon Valley. Of course, I think a lot of our participants want to know what Eric thinks about that, and this post-human era that we are supposed to go to, but I know Luc has a very tough line on that too.
Yeah, let Eric go, and I will vent.
Yeah, I'm sure you both have a few things to say about that.
Yeah, I would say actually most of the conversations about transhumanism are kind of meta discourse over technology made by people who do not create and develop those technologies, and time to time even do not use those technologies. And so and for me, the key point is if it's not really based on technology, is it really based on anthropology? And I don't think so. At all. I mean, most of the time, the anthropological basis, I mean, the knowledge they have, I'm speaking about a science, which is a human science, but which has a real and deep value. And the knowledge they have is very, very weak. I mean, you consider that you can unplug the mind from the body, but you feel, and even part of your memory is in your body. I mean, the people who have addiction know that. I mean, the memory of alcohol for someone who is a former alcoholic. I mean, the alcoholic. I mean, this is something that exists. So, I mean, it's so simple. There's such a simplification that this discourse for me is not really relevant. And as I said previously, the crisis has shown as we've discovered the human being remains a creature which is terribly weak and which can be, let's say, sick or die very easily. So do not dream to have superpowers. Let's just try to be authentic humans instead of having the desire to be something else, like in a Marvel film.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, we cannot superhero. I mean, we cannot be superhero for sure. So, I mean, I don't have much, to add to that. I mean, I have zero respect for those guys, because I mean, as Eric said, I mean, there is no science there. This is just, about ego, their own ego, and they want to grow this ego so much, that they want to be immortal somehow, right? And that's, I mean, this is maybe reaching the god status that I was talking about before, and I don't think that we should even think about it. And the kind of technology that they are trying to use, I mean, first of all, most of the time this is very, very old technology that they didn't understand, and so. I tend to ignore them. I'm sad for them actually, because I think that they are trying to reach a goal that is not possible, and they are wasting their time.
I had a question. There's a question for you, Luc, from Carlos, who lives nearby in Silicon Valley, and says maybe in the questions there's also the answer, because he has. Do you think there's a lack of opportunities for people to meet, outdoor, to go and talk with people outside of their professional network? In a way, Silicon Valley is like a village, right? People have this. You're all very bright, intelligent people over there, and thinking maybe the same way.
But we are weird. I mean, we have to say that we are very weird. I mean, in the sense that, I mean, Carlos is right. I mean, there is no really social life, outside work. I mean, so it means, I mean, I'm French, as you can tell, of course. And what I love in France, what I love in France, and particularly in Paris, is all the cafe, right, with the terrace that you have, and you can sit there, and you have, a social life. Weirdly, besides the weather that we have, that is incredible here, we don't have that. We don't have a cafe, where you can go and sit down outside, and just talk with people, and even people that you don't know, and just, start a conversation. We don't have that. It didn't exist until actually June. So June last year, for the first time, I saw in the two streets of Palo Alto, the two large streets of Palo Alto, California Street and University Street, I saw restaurants, bringing table outside. It was the law because of the pandemic, but they had to bring the table outside. It was the only way to go to a restaurant. And I found that it was actually incredible, because I saw the life, and Carlos most likely saw that as well in Palo Alto, because he lives there. I mean, California Street and University Street became, much more vibrant because of that. I saw what I saw in Paris, for years coming up there. But I mean, now, it closed again, and the streets, are back to their function of street with cars, no more tables outside. So I think that this is something that I cannot explain. I don't know why there is no cafes, in this area. It doesn't make any sense to me because of the weather, right? So we should have cafes 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 360 days a year, but we don't. So I don't know why.
Eric, there's a question for you from Josephine. I don't know if you saw it, but it's interesting to see that. Yeah, she says the Silicon Valley and those innovation places are less likely to talk and think spirituality, because they're mainly, these places are filled with nihilists and atheists. Would you agree with that?
I would not be so sharp in the judgment. I guess that for sure having a kind of organized spirituality could help to consider various, let's say, aspects of the human being, what we were talking about. But what I see is that there's a hunger for that. I mean, it's not for religion, but for I mean, people cannot be only materialists, and my feeling is that at some point, perhaps in the beginning of their career, life, they want to achieve some stuffs, and so they are super focused for a time, but then they start back to go back to something, things which are deeper. And my feeling is that, I mean, it's in any kind of culture and so on. It does. The problem is it doesn't goes through the common and known ways. And so the problem is that that's also perhaps why a lot of people are talking about transhumanism and so on, because that's the place everybody has to explore, and a lot of people a little bit can be, I would say, a little bit lost in their quest, or can find kind of gurus who will take advantage of this quest, this research. But I don't think that everybody is nihilist, and I think that actually they even have a project for the society which is not a bad one. I mean, as we said previously, make the world a better place. It's something that it's not empty of meaning for everybody. I think it has a meaning. The question is just that this is like the horizon, and we want to build that. But everybody has to develop its own feature, device, solution. And this is what we call solutionism. So everybody makes a little move, but the addition of all those moves doesn't build a project for the human being and doesn't build a project of society. And for me, this is the big danger that we are currently facing, is that, there's no invisible hand of the market that will turn all those nice but small initiatives into a big humanity. That doesn't exist. And for me, one of the difficulties that we're facing is that actually this innovation, this flow of innovation doesn't help the society to be restructured. More and more people consider, for example, that states should be considered as platforms. This is the ultimate way of libertarianism. But for me, all of that is pretty dangerous, even for democracy. And so for me, when we talk about inclusiveness, so inclusiveness in technology is not only economical one, it's also a political one. And at the end of the day, my only fear would be that we collectively, as a people of developers and users of technology, we allow things to go in a way which would be less democratic. And we see that the use of technologies, and that's perhaps why people were so reluctant to give the data, even for an app to fight the pandemic, just because now people are feeling that something is perhaps going wrong. But once again, it's not a question of technology, it's much more a political question.
Yeah, I'm going to rebound on that. It's a question of, again, education, because we have the keys. We decide. And this is what we have to realize, is that nothing will be because of the technology. It will be because of us. So until we all collectively, have a better understanding of those technologies, we cannot make the right decisions, because the political, people, they are just represented by definition of us, right? So they are supposed to take decisions according to what we think, right? And so if we don't think well, if we don't know well, they cannot know well, and they cannot make the right decisions. If the decisions are coming from upstairs, it's the danger. This is where you have only a few that are going to be in the nose and that are going to decide. And this is what is called dictatorship.
Yeah, I had also an interesting point from Anne Besançon, and maybe we can close on that, because it's nearly an hour since we started this discussion. We could talk for the whole day in San Francisco and the whole night here, but there's all good things have to have an end, as we say in France. So Anne says Silicon Valley is gathering people from different cultures, ethics, and values for one highest common denominator: reason, technology. The spiritual vacuum is the product of that drive. Would you agree with that, Luc, Eric?
I don't know if there is a spiritual vacuum. I actually don't know. When I see the number of churches that are around here, I'm really not sure that there is a vacuum. So I don't. I mean, as we said when we were talking about with Carlos, the question from Carlos. I mean, we don't know each other. This is maybe the issue. I mean, we know each other in the job by working together, by being excited. But frankly, I have no idea, what my people that are working with me, are outside the work. So maybe the issue, and maybe this is right there, a spiritual vacuum if we don't, take care of each other correctly. I don't know, but I don't know.
But yeah, for me, the danger is less the lack of God, because as a believer, I consider that God is everywhere. So you cannot expel him from a place. So it's more the lack of consideration for the human being. And when Luc says that there's no place to meet, or there's no, let's say, culture of meeting randomly with new people and so on, just people work by ecosystem, by group, by companies and so on. This perhaps is the problem. And it's more like trying to break the walls a little bit, open the doors for that. And perhaps this pandemic, as Luc said, has given a kind of flavor of how it can be. I think there's a lot of work now to do, just to be sure that, and perhaps Europe can provide something, because we have in many countries in Europe this culture of going and talking randomly. There's a kind of serendipity. And I would say that even the tech people would consider that serendipity is very good for innovation. So actually, it's not bad. Even for, I've seen that there was an art curator among in the audience asking a question, and I guess that for an art curator talking to someone who has a PhD in machine learning, talking to another, I mean, that's how the big projects have raised. But those projects having many sources probably will be much more human-centric than the ones which are only developed by tech people for a tech environment.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, when I said that there is no place to meet, I mean, there are actually many places to meet, but there are, what is called now meetups, and stuff like that. So, I mean, 27 years ago, when I went to Xerox PARC, and I went to this amphitheater with all the scientists that I was, referring to in my PhD thesis. I mean, this was just incredible. But it was, a group of ourselves, just the scientists, right? So we didn't, and this is the problem with the cafes and stuff like that we just talked about. We don't look maybe too much at the outside of this society. We just too much at our own, group, and not enough, outside.
And that's a bit crazy for people who always try to think out of the box. And thinking out of the box means also living a little bit out of the box.
That's correct.
Great. It was really great talking with you two. Thanks a lot. Very inspiring. And I think we all agree that Silicon Valley is still a great place to be and innovate, of course, Luc. Our problem with Eric is that we are in lack of Silicon Valley. We used to go there at least maybe twice, and now we're frustrated because we're grounded in Europe. Although we have a lot of cafes, but we don't have the same dynamic and level of innovation. And every time we go there, we come back. We're different persons. So thanks a lot. Thanks to you all. Thanks for the audience. We had a great time. And I'll leave the floor to Laurence for the very last word. Eric and Luc, you stay with us backstage. We'll have a small
thank you very much.
Digital cocktail.
Thank you very much. Oh, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. So thank you very much, Luc and Eric, for this very interesting conversation. Thank you, Gilles, for moderating this panel today. Yeah, as a conclusion, we can say that at the FAC-CSF, we try to bring together, different industry and try to have people think out of the box. When you think at the French American Business Award, we have people from the tech, the wine industry, the gastronomy industry. So really try to, foster this. But I agree with the bubble of Silicon Valley. It's a very thing that we have here. Well, thank you again. The next edition of Friends versus Silicon Valley will be the 10th edition and will be on e-commerce, so a very different topic. But thank you everybody for being here today, for all your comments. And I want to wish you all a Happy New Year, because we didn't have the time to wish you all a Happy New Year, and see you next time.